Hello, friendos. Welcome back. It's late today when I'm recording this, so if I get some things wrong or misspeak a few times, forgive me. Big news, though. For a couple reasons. Dark and Darker, obviously one of the biggest games at the moment in the West, that would have been a way, way bigger game if it was allowed to release on Steam, but was getting sued and DMCA'd by Nexon for allegations of essentially stealing the game. Loads of videos on this, you can go check those out. Basically, the court case in the West, in Washington State, has been dismissed. This is not the hugest W ever, because obviously the case is still going to go on in Korea, and it does mean that some things aren't going to change, some things will, but it's also definitely not a loss. They've definitely fucking cracked this one here. The reason it was dismissed and why it's not a W in terms of are they right is that it was dismissed based on, as we went over last time, forum non-convenience, which is essentially arguing this is not the convenient place to go through this, right? Because obviously, as we went through in the last video, it's a Korean company against a Korean company where all the servers are in Korean, all the logs are in Korean, all the witnesses are Korean, and then you're suing them in Washington. And obviously the reason why Nexon did this is because Dark and Darker was going to release predominantly in the West. They'd marketed most of their stuff to a Western audience. They're on Steam. Steam's in Washington. And they argued basically the reason it should have been in Washington was because when the DMCA went from Nexon to Steam based on Dark and Darker and they removed it, at that point, basically how it works is you, as the person who's been notified against with the DMCA, you can counterclaim and say this is wrong. And if you do that, you are essentially, according to Valve and Steam, entering into an agreement to have this legal situation resolved there. Now, what the court is obviously argued, and, well, the court didn't need to argue, what the judge has said is that regardless of this should just be solved in a Korean court of law, which I think everybody can agree with at this point. I personally think it's a shame that we didn't get to the point of discovery to find out who's right, who's wrong, and get to the bottom of stuff way quicker and not have to go digging through Korean stuff in months when this actually comes to a head. But obviously, that's just for my own personal wanting to know what happened fully, as opposed to, the people that only care about the game coming out, which is understandable. The game is obviously currently out. You can download it, you can play it, but a lot of people aren't doing because they want it on Steam. Understandably so, everybody loves Steam, and they probably think if it's on Steam, it's a safer bet that nothing bad's going to happen. Does this getting dismissed in the West, in this Washington court, mean that the DMCA is invalid and the game can come back on Steam? Now, there's a couple problems with that. One, I don't think that's the case, because obviously Valve will probably still be waiting to see what happens with the very real, still ongoing criminal and civil litigation in Korea, right? Because it's still the same principle. Why would Valve care about this? Well, because if you are aware of something that is essentially copyright infringement, you are then potentially party to things going on and may come into problems later. Why would Valve risk that? Why would they stick their neck out? Maybe they will. We'll have to wait and see. But I think what most likely happens is there is a hearing, I believe, at the end of August, so this month or next month in Korea, where they're going to talk about injunctions, because Nexon obviously wants injunctions on Dark and Darker, on Iron Mace, so that they can't make money and continue what they're calling damages, because obviously from their perspective, the money that the game makes, the influence, the occupying space of Dark and Darker is constantly accruing damages because they say that the game has been stolen from them and shouldn't exist. Now, obviously, anyone who gets into business with Iron Mace and Dark and Darker, potentially people who buy the game, if this does all go Nexon's way, it could mean that the game goes away, all the money that they've earned is owed to Nexon, or something crazy like that. So obviously, there's a lot of moving parts to this. If the injunction doesn't go in Nexon's favor, then essentially that could mean maybe the game comes to Steam. The issue is, of course, that they've already released the game on another platform, sold copies on another platform, and are working with another company. So would they just be able to, pick up and move to Steam? Who knows? That's a question I guess they're going to have to answer. I haven't seen whether they have or not. But it's a little bit more complicated than DMCA was in West. West lawsuit is gone, therefore DMCA is completely invalid and Valve are going to reinstate the game. Now, a lot of people that don't read into stuff are going to see the headline of the lawsuit being dismissed and think, wow, that means Nexon was wrong, iMace was 100% right, there was no legal basis for this. This is literally like a common thing that happens in law in general. People sue the wrong sub company, or it's in the wrong jurisdiction. This happens, and it's nothing based on the merit of the actual case. It's just based on where the case is being argued. One thing that people obviously don't take into account when thinking about law things, the court has a finite amount of space and time, and they don't like it being occupied by things that aren't relevant, or not even that it's not relevant, that could be argued somewhere else and it would be better served to be there because it's their problem and not ours. Especially they're going to take a negative approach to this and a negative outlook to this when it's a big company doing it for what they see as a reason to be doing it in that place, rather than somewhere where they know they have the legal representation and right to sue them in that other location. The judge actually said this. They talk about in the document, which is here. I'll leave a link in the description. I'm not going to read it all to you, but essentially what the judge says is, you had a clause within your contract that said any situation, which is totally normal in every company ever. If something happens, it's going to be solved in this place, and it's said in Korea. So obviously they're saying in that contract, if things go wrong, we're going to take you to court or solve it in this court, in this jurisdiction. But then you decide to do it in the West, and you're doing it for clear reasons. And one of the reasons that Nexon argued was about the evidentiary gathering in the US being better than in Korea. So essentially they're saying it would be easier for us to discover the truth of everything and prove that they did these bad things here than it is there. But that's not the court's problem, is it? It doesn't mean that it should be in the West. Also, when talking about this, there is the chance for appeal. They have 30 days at this point to appeal this. They probably will do, because if you already put this much money into it, you're not going to not do it. And basically, they're just going to be able to look at what the judge said, argue against it, try and bolster their points. And there's a possibility that it gets revived, basically. So you'll not really see anything happening, even if something was to happen based on the DMCA and coming back to Steam for the next 30 plus days. Because they're probably not going to do the actually file the appeal until the last minute, basically, because that's just how this stuff typically works. So it seems like in the next sort of 30, 45, 60 days, we're going to get at least some more stuff related to Dark and Darker, Iron Mace, and Iron Mace Nexon, the battle for supremacy of the Dark and Darker type game. And that's because obviously we've got the injunction hearing coming up, which will be within the next month or so. And then, of course, what goes on with the appeal, which will be very public as soon as it happens. So, good news and bad news, I guess, both at the same time. Bad news if you want to know what happened and get to all the facts and all the juicy information that I definitely wanted to see that would come out in Discovery. And good news if you're wanting the game to continue being playable, nothing crazy going on, and the potential for Iron Mace to just continue operating the game forever and all this to go away. I know absolutely nothing about the Korean legal system, especially when it comes to civil matters. I don't even know where I'd go to find that information. It's something I'll have to look into, especially since, again, we'll be getting some news pretty soon. But I will keep you up to date as soon as I find anything, as soon as I see anything, as soon as there's any more details on the case. And that's probably it for this one. So thanks for watching, and see you next time. Peace.